Morning, everybody. Just so you know, we moved the presenters back closer to the wall because we were getting feedback because they're always standing under these speakers. So once we got them back there, hopefully it'll work out, and the PA system will be nice to us this morning. So, all right, welcome. Glad you're all here. And Martyn's back, but we've lost Karen. She's got this job thing going on. All right. And we have a roving mic for questions, so be prepared.
Welcome, everybody. Good to see you again. It feels like we've been on this streak of just bitter cold, so I'm hoping that gets kind of lifted here in the next week. But we are back. It isn't crazy cold like it was last week. So let's start with our opening prayer. We'll jump into Mark 8. O Lord Jesus Christ, open the eyes of my heart that I may hear your word and understand and do your will, for I am a sojourner upon the earth. Hide not your commandments from me, but open my eyes that I may perceive the wonders of your law. Speak unto me the hidden and secret things of your wisdom. On you do I set my hope, O my God, that you shall enlighten my mind and understanding with the light of your knowledge, not only to cherish those things which are written, but to do them. For you are the enlightenment of those who lie in darkness, and from you comes every good and every gift. Amen. All right. I put at the top a picture. This is from the bulletin at St. Mary's last week. We had a reading from Matthew. But it had the bulletin had this picture of Jesus on a boat, and I thought that feels like what we've been doing. That's the setting that we've been sitting at for several weeks now. I mean, throughout our first chapters of Mark, it feels like we've got Jesus kind of going around, crossing the Sea of Galilee, going to the other side, going back, going off to the side to visit another city. But basically we've got him going on and off boats. And this will be I think, as I peek ahead, this will be our last day where we've really got this kind of Sea of Galilee, northern Jesus. So, as I close my eyes and imagine where we've been with all these stories, it's going to be little villages and then close to the Sea of Galilee and a lot of boats. That's the majority of the time. And then this passage, this chapter, will mark a transition as we start moving into the Passion narrative, more clarity about who this figure is with Jesus. We'll see him actually talk and reveal something about what is going to happen and what the near future will bring. And we'll also, with the Passion, we'll move toward Jerusalem. So we won't be so boat-based, which is where, and boat and village-based, which is where we've been for the past while. So let's start off. We're going to begin with the feeding of the 4,000. So if you think to yourself, it feels like we just talked about this. It's very similar. A lot of language overlaps between the feeding of the 5,000, which was 2 chapters ago, and then this feeding of the 4,000, which we're going to start with. But let me start with reading through verse 13. Actually, let's go through through 13. In those days, when there again was a great crowd without anything to eat, he summoned the disciples and said, "My heart is moved with pity for the crowd, because they have been with me now for 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them away hungry to their homes, they will collapse on the way, and some of them have come a great distance." His disciples answered him, "Where can anyone get enough to satisfy them here in this deserted place?" Still he asked them, "How many loaves do you have?" "7," they replied. He ordered the crowd to sit down on the ground. Then taking the 7 loaves, he gave thanks, broke them, and gave them to his disciples to distribute. And they distributed them to the crowd. They also had a few fish. He said the blessing over them and ordered them distributed also. They ate and were satisfied. They picked up the fragments left over, 7 baskets. There were about 4,000 people. He dismissed them and got into the boat with his disciples and came to the region of Dalmanutha. The Pharisees came forward and began to argue with him, seeking from him a sign from heaven to test him. He sighed from the depth of his spirit and said, "Why does this generation seek a sign? Amen, I say to you, no sign will be given to this generation." Then he left them, got into the boat again, and went off to the other shore. And let's read the next little bit too. They had forgotten to bring bread, and they had only 1 loaf with them in the boat. He enjoined them, "Watch out, guard against the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod." They concluded among themselves that it was because they had no bread. When he became aware of this, he said to them, "Why do you conclude that it is because you have no bread? Do you not yet understand or comprehend? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes and not see, ears and not hear? And do you not remember? When I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many wicker baskets full of fragments you picked up? When I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many full baskets of fragments did you pick up?" They answered him, 7. He said to them, "Do you still not understand?" Okay, this is, on the one hand, it seems this is a passage that echoes the feeding of the 5,000 that we've just gotten. But on the other hand, we also have this developing tension with the Pharisees and the disciples. So I thought we'd start just by talking amongst yourselves at your table about how does this build and how does this add on the feeding of the 5,000? How is this, at the end here with this discussion, Jesus makes reference to that earlier feeding, the 5,000. So there's, how is this adding something to those past stories? And what is it here is there anything here that we could talk about or that seems odd? Anyways, I got some stuff, but talk among yourselves and we'll come back and see what we think about this passage. Yeah, that's right. It is
brain like how long they're going to race 25. Your brief on report doesn't mature in all of this. That's why young kids make great soldiers. They go get killed in black and white.
Right. Balance in the field.
Okay. Okay, so what did you see here? What were the kinds of questions that came up at your table about this passage? Yeah.
Well, the use of the numbers.
The numbers.
Matthew says 12, which means completion, and Mark says 7, which is the perfect number.
Okay. So there's a question about the numbers, which has an unusual emphasis in Mark. So, I mean, that's at the end of our passage. We'll kind of double back to the things we moved over as well. But do you have eyes and not see, ears and not hear? Do you not remember when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000? How many wicker baskets of fragments you picked up? They answered him, 12. When I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many full baskets of fragments did you pick up? They answered him, 7. Do you still not understand? So there seems to be, Jesus gives these 2 questions to the disciples, and then they come back, with these numbers. And so what's going on there? Any thoughts, any discussion that you all had about the numbers? And if you turn to Matthew, he's a little bit more with the same story. He kind of plays this down. The 5 loaves for the 5,000, and how many wicker baskets you took up? And the 7 loaves for the 4,000, and how many baskets you took up? So Matthew sort of doesn't want to. He's just like, there were a lot. Do you not remember that we fed everybody from almost nothing, and we had lots left over? And but Mark is a little bit more specific, and that is a point of, like, is Mark trying to do these numbers mean anything? That's been a head scratcher for interpreters as they come at this. Is why does Jesus query how many baskets? 12. How many baskets for the second incident? 7. Don't you get it? And did those numbers come up in any of the other tables? I know we had some number talk here. What did you all talk about?
We just question the significance, and if that could be further elucidated.
Okay. So right, can we understand what's going on here with the numbers? Any thoughts about the numbers?
12 always refers to the tribes, how many tribes of Israel there are.
Okay.
But 7 means something in Christian, sacraments and gifts of the Holy Spirit, but I don't know what it meant to the Jews, 7.
Okay. Well, we've got so this is a really good point, is how many baskets in that first incident? 12. And 12 isn't an innocent number in the Bible, right? We've got 12 tribes, 12 disciples. 12 is kind of a number of fullness in some ways. And then 7 is also, and you've got the Sabbath. It's actually interesting how many 7s come up in this passage. So 7 is another number that gets picked on a lot. So it doesn't seem to be a random number. How many baskets did we pick up? Oh, there were a whole bunch, maybe 16. Instead we've kind of landed on the 12 and the 7. And so for commentators kind of come at this and is this the point? It seems like Jesus isn't just saying there were lots of baskets. That's what Matthew does. But in this case, Jesus is saying, no, there were 12. And how many in the second? 7. Don't you get it? And so maybe he's kind of pushing on the disciples here to think in terms of this is, it's already miraculous enough with the food multiplying and all that, but that there are these further signs about what's coming. And we'll get to just a few more paragraphs and we'll get Jesus really with a grand reveal about what he's up to and what his mission is here. But there are other people who say, no, all of the point, numbers are numbers. It's just, he's just saying it was a lot, right? There was plenty left over. It was miraculous. That's all that's happening. You really can't prove anything with this, but it's interesting to me that Mark kind of makes a big deal of the numbers here. Yeah.
Why is he so annoyed that they can't understand what 2,000 years later, we're still scratching our heads?
Yes.
I would say that teacher should look at his information, make it a little clearer.
Yeah, I think a good point taken. That that's not a simple point, right? And if we're wondering about it now, he said to them, "Do you still not understand?" Although we could perhaps say they're more versed in what should be happening, what this Messiah will look like, and in fact, we'll see that Messiah idea come up here. So they should be better at reading these signs. In fact, perhaps we, thousands of years later, would find it a little bit harder to get some of these. Any other thoughts about those numbers? Other things that you saw from the passage. We kind of hit the end of it there. Yeah.
He says, amen, I say to you, no sign will be given to this generation. That strikes me because for those who are paying attention, there are plenty of signs.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Pharisees come and ask him for a sign, and they say, and Jesus responds to them, no sign will be given to this generation. And the comment is, well, it seems like there are a lot of signs. We're just coming out of the feeding of the 4,000, which is kind of a big deal, right? There's like food that seems to multiply out of nowhere. So there are these signs. So it's what does that mean? No sign will be given to this generation. We've just come from what has to be a big miracle. I mean, the repeating of this miracle, the feeding of the 5,000, and then we turn to this feeding of the 4,000, which plays out in very similar language, would seem to say that this type of miracle or this kind of event really meant a lot to the gospel writer, but also the people, that this was a clear, miraculous event, and then it echoed or rhymed with what later Christians experienced with the Eucharist and the breaking of the bread that happened there. Yes?
I wonder when he's saying, like, no sign will be given to this generation, he's basically saying, if you can't see the signs that were already there, you're not going to see anything. Like I can't make it any more clear.
Yeah. Yes. So the comment is, maybe this is more directed at not everybody, but this group that is coming to him and challenging him for a sign. And the response in that case is, if you can't see what's right in front of you, in fact, if you would just, maybe the Pharisees, because he crosses, got into the boat. So he's in a different spot now. There's signs all around if you open your eyes and look. And that would kind of, what you're saying would also go in with this claim. Do you have eyes and not see, ears and not hear? Do you not remember? So there's this challenge of, if you just look, you can see these things. Yeah.
And maybe their faith, they want a sign, but you need faith. You've seen all this, but you have to have faith.
Yes. Maybe there's something else that's required to really let this sink in. I mean, it's mysterious how the disciples, they've just come from the feeding of the 5,000 and walking on the water, which we got in the last reading, and the disciples, where can anyone get enough bread to satisfy? They're still kind of responding, and how is exactly this going to work when they seem to have recent evidence that it's going to be okay. So there seems to be something missing, something lacking, perhaps, perhaps faith. And it's striking with the disciples that they seem, I mean, as a reader, you're kind of frustrated with them, I find. It's like, you should be able to get this, yeah.
Now, Christ was getting huge followings, and he can also make wine, water, bread, fish out of nothing. That's kind of a guy who could raise an army in a hurry and not worry about feeding them. So wouldn't that make him a dangerous person to the kings or whoever, the Romans or whoever was watching about?
Yeah, it could. I mean, I think this goes back to that, where are we geographically? We're kind of out in the middle of nowhere to a large, these villages in the north, and that threat side of it will, I think, really arise when he heads into the center, into Jerusalem, which is what's coming, and that's when things will really get heated around Jesus. But yeah, we can see how this would be a threat, and we'll see in just a moment, Peter, I mean, we're going to get some hints of differing expectations about who this Messiah will be, what this figure what we can expect from this figure. And we'll see, in fact, Peter and Jesus kind of get into a clash here in a second. Yeah.
There's a footnote in 11 and 12. It says, the objection of the Pharisees that Jesus' miracles are unsatisfactory for proving the arrival of God's kingdom is comparable to the request of the crowd for a sign in John 6:30 and 31. Jesus' response shows that a sign originating in human demand will not be provided. And then further Numbers 14.
Yes. So the comment is, this is also comes up in John, which is interesting. We have the synoptic gospels, remember, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and there's a lot of parallels. They seem to be working from a common tradition, and then John is different. But John gives a similar sequence of events. So this is, it's unusual when we get a kind of parallels in John as well. And if I could add a parallel to that, in Exodus, so when we talked about the feeding of the 5,000 a couple weeks ago, I mentioned that commentators see a lot of Exodus parallels, like similar words that show up in the gospel that were in the Exodus story. And what's connected there is the manna, that God miraculously feeds his people through this manna that comes from heaven. And the gospel writers, again, in that they're kind of seeing a rhyme between here is this new message and messenger, a new lawgiver in Moses and in Jesus, and then we get these feedings, that the multiplication of the bread, and that this is in some ways kind of tying into that Exodus story, that kind of a new world is dawning here. And then the second thing is, what do the people of Israel do when that's all happening? They grumble. They don't like what Moses is doing. And in fact, they demand a sign from Moses. Right after they've come out of Egypt and the parting of the Red Sea and all that, they demand a sign from him. And so you can see the Pharisees kind of playing that part of the grumbling Israelites that you get back in Exodus, but now they're demanding a sign also. And Jesus gives a similar answer. So that's one thing that's in refusing to give a sign on demand. And so that's maybe a piece of what's happening here. Yeah.
That's the thing that I noticed, is that he isn't saying I won't give signs.
Right.
He's saying I won't give one when it's demanded.
Right, exactly. I'm not going to produce this on demand. All you have to do, if you have eyes to see, ears to hear, you can understand what's happening here.
Were there plenty of other preachers doing magic tricks that were used to asking for these things?
And I don't know. I'm sure there was some, but it does seem, we just have to guess overall in the ancient world that there was healing of various sorts. But I don't get any, it's kind of speculation a little bit on to what extent there'd be others. I think this was miraculous and out of the bounds of what anybody had experienced before, even if there were, others that are out there. The one other question I want to hit is the leavened bread. What does that mean? What's that?
Settled, they can take their time to let the bread rise.
Okay. They had forgotten to bring bread. They had only one loaf with them in the boat. So this is the disciples are, we've gone through the feeding of the 5,000, the feeding of the 4,000, and now we're in the boat with Jesus, and we're hungry, we have nothing to eat. So this is that, you can get frustrated with them. He enjoined them, watch out, guard against the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. They concluded among themselves that it was because they had no bread. Yes?
We talked about that because that's always kind of given me a little trouble. But we came up with, obviously leaven expands. I know you said rises, but it will expand. And so we were thinking maybe watch out and guard against the expansion of disbelief.
Okay. Okay, so leaven is it's like yeast, but apparently, I don't know, I was reading about ancient bread, but it's a little different than our yeast, but it does that same thing. It kind of expands the bread. So what exactly is the metaphor here if the Pharisees are the leaven? Watch out for them. Yes?
Do you think Jesus is talking about physical bread, or what the Pharisees are feeding you, what they are preaching to you?
Interesting. Guard against the leaven and the leaven of Herod. I mean, we still have to deal with the metaphor of so they're adding something. There's something being added to the bread, and maybe that's what you're saying. Maybe it's this teaching, this.
What the Pharisees are saying.
Okay.
It's not, what did you say, sourdough?
Well, yeah, unless it was sourdough.
And back here.
I'm just thinking maybe leaven might be compared to faith. As we need faith to, and I also think about where we're told, seek and you will find.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that seeking is that ingredient that needs to be in order to have that promise fulfilled, that we will find the truth.
Okay. So the comment is maybe the sort of on the line of those parables like the mustard seed, and I think there is actually a yeast parable as well. So there's something that needs, like it's faith, something that needs to be added to make something grow, and then the idea would be beware of this version of that, the version of the kingdom on offer by the Pharisees. Yes.
I think of the 600 and some rules that they added to what was originally said.
Okay, so the oral law, which we've seen Jesus taking on already in other passages. So remember we've seen this is part of this long-running set of conflicts that Jesus has with the religious leaders, and that's been over this fact that there's an oral law and a written law, and the Pharisees believe that with Moses came the written law, came both of those, and that they are following these extra rules, and Jesus has challenged that. Yes?
Dating back to the old Exodus, how Passover began by eating the unleavened bread.
Right. So here, it's really good. This would be another way, we've talked about these Exodus parallels, and this could be another one, is that what happens in Passover is you purify your house and you eat unleavened bread. And that's part of, symbolically, you get rid of all the yeast or whatever it is that makes the dough rise. And for Passover, you eat unleavened bread. And so there's a kind of way in which you're purifying your house, you're purifying at that time, and one of the things that's part of that purification is the cutting out of the leaven, of what makes the bread rise. And so this would be, that's another way to take this back to Exodus, and that the Pharisees in this case are the piece of impurity that could get into this kingdom and this new way. And so beware of the leaven. We're in a kind of Passover time. Jesus is going to shortly talk about his coming death and predict that and talk about it. And so this is a kind of a point where you need to beware of that leaven. We need to purify ourselves of this doubt, this skepticism, and this these teachings that are blind to the new world that is here. Yes.
Well, when I first mentioned settled, I guess my read was that they're in a rush, didn't have time for the bread to rise, whereas the Pharisees and Herod, they're established and they're making the rules.
Yeah.
And this is a new order.
Yes.
Things different.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think about the extent to which, the biblical writers are just steeped in the Hebrew Bible, and that's a piece about Passover, is you're in a rush. You're not waiting for the bread to rise. You're ready to go, and you're ready to flee and leave to go to the promised land. And so maybe that's a bit here. There are elements that we need, the leaven of the Pharisees and this false teaching is something that we need to leave behind. And, I mean, I don't think there's any one version of that, but it's an interesting metaphor to think about. And I've liked several of the things you've said. I think it maybe works on several levels of what does it mean to get rid of, to beware, to guard against the leaven of the Pharisees. And I think that's an interesting piece here. Should we let's move on so we can get to the Peter part here. This is verse 22, and I'll take us down to the end. When they arrived at Bethsaida, they brought to him a blind man and begged him to touch him. He took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. Putting spittle on his eyes, he laid his hands on him and asked, "Do you see anything?" Looking up, he replied, "I see people looking like trees and walking." Then he laid hands on his eyes a second time, and he saw clearly. His sight was restored, and he could see everything distinctly. Then he sent him home and said, "Do not even go into the village." Okay, let's just stop there. This is a very interesting story. It is like a double healing, right? That he putting spittle on his eyes, he laid his hands. Do you see anything? This person, and this isn't in the other Gospels, gives an extraordinarily memorable line. He said, "I see people looking like trees and walking." And then Jesus laid his hands a second time, and then he sees clearly. So, this is a miracle. Why do we get this? Any thoughts about this process? Why is this story have this kind of double healing? Yes?
I think it's like faith is like a journey, like his faith wasn't complete the first time until he saw something, and then expanded his faith.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. Yeah. So the comment there is, let me just repeat it for the camera, that faith is a journey, and you have this kind of an incomplete healing, and maybe there's going to be a process. And then yes.
It reminds me of being born again.
Okay. How?
Well, that just being alive isn't good enough. You don't understand your purpose in life until you're born again. And then you begin to see clearly as to why you're here, what your purpose is, and move towards fulfilling that promise.
Okay. So you're saying there's a kind of, in the process of being born again, there's perhaps there's stages in that, and understanding what your purpose is and where you're heading. Yes.
Think about that partial, where he opened the eyes to see partially, and then more completely. And it reminds me of where Jesus says, "I have come that you might have life and have it to the full."
Mm-hmm.
So there seems to always be more with Jesus.
Okay. So there's, I think that's an interesting verse to think about. I've come that you may have life and have it abundantly, or more, or to the full. And maybe there's kind of stages there, right, of life, and then abundance after that.
And like every day, he has more for us.
Yes. Yes.
That, and also when teaching us. when we pray, to not just one and done, but to continue to pray.
Okay.
Whatever it is that we need from God.
Okay. So the comment there is, that maybe there is a kind of a continuation even in prayer as don't give up, keep moving. And I think you're all like kind of grasping the importance of this is, you could read this and say, well, Jesus had to like lay hands twice. That's kind of strange. But there's something there as a lesson. I think this is a miracle story that is pointing to the fact that, you can be partially clear and then fully clear, that maybe there is a kind of process in this whole thing. And remember, this is just coming after the passage where he says, do you have eyes and not see, ears and not hear? Do you not remember? So we have several verses where Jesus is frustrated with the disciples at their partial knowledge. They see, but they don't fully understand. They don't fully grasp. And then this miracle story seems to be partially of interest to Mark because it kind of portrays a kind of process that here you could kind of see things vaguely. You see trees walking, and that maybe corresponds to the disciples kind of seeing Jesus in this new kingdom and kind of seeing trees walking. And then they see things clearly. And he's been complaining about them not being able to see clearly what's right in front of them, and now we're going to get the reveal and where he kind of takes things away so you can see and understand what's happening. They still won't get it though. Okay, let's keep going. Now Jesus and his disciples set out for the villages of Caesarea Philippi. Along the way he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" They said in reply, "John the Baptist, others Elijah, still others one of the prophets." And he asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter said to him in reply, "You are the Messiah." Then he warned them not to tell anyone about him. All right, let's stop there too. What do you, first of all, where did we recently hear more speculation about maybe he's John the Baptist, maybe he's Elijah? Do you remember where we saw a little bit of that kind of speculation a couple chapters ago? In the John the Baptist section, where Herod is like, here's about Jesus, and some people think he's John the Baptist come back to life, some people think he's Elijah, a prophet. So here we have this kind of more kind of hearsay report about what people are saying about Jesus. Peter said to him, "But who do you say?" Now this is the challenge to the disciples. Peter said, "You are the Messiah." And by the way, Messiah is Christ, right? That's the Messiah is the Hebrew, Christ is the Greek for the anointed one, the promised one that is out there. So, we speak of Jesus as Jesus Christ. Jesus, the Messiah, is what we're saying there. And this is Peter saying, "You are the Christ." And then does Jesus accept that? How would you characterize the response here?
Jesus accepts Peter, and it's like, oh my gosh, somebody's catching on.
Yes.
That's how he got to be the first one.
Okay, and hold on to that thought. Yes, so Peter is the first one to really make this confession. You are the Messiah. Yes?
I didn't know if we were going on to the next sentence.
That the Son of Man must suffer greatly. Oh, he warned them. Yes.
Would it be because it wasn't time yet? Because once they knew,
Yeah. It seems to be something like that. And we see this through this opening part of Mark, is this Jesus is concerned to keep it a secret. Doesn't want people to, especially if you're right, he doesn't want the word to get out yet. So there's a little bit of hesitance. Now, from here on, we'll start getting that being more public and something that he's actually teaching. Yes?
I don't know what to think of this. First, he's talking to a huge crowd. Then he takes a blind man outside the city. It's just the two of them. And now he's talking to his disciples, and that's more than is positive. I have to remind myself of that, but still it's a small group.
Yes.
And in the last two instances, he says, don't tell anybody. I'm not sure how to think about that.
Yeah. So we've, we're on, set out for the villages. Along the way, he asked them. So we have this smaller group, and he's talking with them, and he asked them, who do people say that I am? And then he wants it to remain a secret. I hear that wanting it to remain a secret as being in part about, you're right, this is correct, just don't tell any, I'm not ready to, this isn't the public reveal quite yet. Yeah.
I think one of the other Gospels, after Peter says that you are the Messiah, I think one of the other Gospels follows that up with, blessed are you, Peter, God has revealed this to you.
Right. So this is a really important passage when it comes to the Catholic understanding of Peter and the Pope, right? Is that when in Matthew, who do you say that I am? Simon Peter said in reply, you are the Messiah. That's what he says in Mark. Son of the living God. And then Jesus says in Mark, okay, don't tell anybody yet. But in Matthew he says, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my heavenly Father. And so I say to you, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of the netherworld shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. And you always see Peter portrayed with keys, right? Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Then he strictly ordered disciples to tell no one that he was the Messiah. So there's the tell no one. But we have here this very expansive passage about Peter and his primacy within the church. So, that's the clear, and Peter being the first pope and this kind of spiritual power from him, that's what that is all built on. And it's interesting to think about, this question of what if we only had Mark again. I think you could say there's a lot of places Mark is concerned not with individual disciples. This is really the first time we know that he has individual disciples, that they're named, but we don't get stories where they step forward. We don't get the story of Peter stepping out of the boat, etc. Here is the first time in Mark that we get one of the disciples stepping forward. It's Peter, and Peter seems to really get the answer correct. You are the Messiah. But Mark doesn't expand upon that in the way that we get with Matthew. But there does seem to be something special. He's the only disciple who gets this kind of individual identity and story. And he's correct with naming that you are the Messiah and understanding that. So there is something special about Peter and about his answer, but it's not nearly as full as what Matthew gives us. And I think we would say, if we just had Mark, you have this whole, I'm building my church upon you, the keys to the kingdom, all that, it would be hard to grab that out of this passage of Mark. And I would just say that's kind of reflection on the part of the church as time goes. Now let's see what happens. He began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer greatly and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests and the scribes, be rejected by the elders, the chief priests and the scribes, and be killed, and rise after 3 days. He spoke this openly. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. At this he turned around and looking at his disciples, rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan. You are thinking not as God does, but as human beings do." He summoned the crowd with his disciples and said to them, "Whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and that of the gospel will save it. What profit is there for one to gain the whole world and forfeit his life? What could one give in exchange for his life? Whoever is ashamed of me and of my words in this faithless and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels. So take a moment and talk about, I'm especially interested in that passage of, get behind me, Satan. What is going on there? Why does Jesus respond so strongly? And what is he getting at? Why does Peter get it so wrong?
Things are small, we hold them back. We'll go other places. You gotta get on it. Rather than something terrible. He wasn't enthusiastic. Peter would come and call people Satan. He just really meant that he was holding them back. Rather than where we're going. Well, yeah, that's the road. He saved his skin. How can you both if you're killed, right? If he's playing the long game. You live to fight another day. That's how I view it. But, it's just like you gotta get on board here. There's no more places and you're always distracted by you sin. I'm moving to another table right now. Maybe. Here you go. Me more than most.
Took him aside and began to rebuke him.
He said, hey, what are you doing here?
Right, but Peter had just been given a pat on the back. Okay, you're getting the picture. And then when Peter tries to assert something, that Jesus said, no, you don't have to do it yet. Because Peter wanted to rebuke him, thinking that he was right.
Let's not go too fast here.
Okay. What did you get out of from this, the rebuke of Peter? We've just got a big, Peter just hit the bell in some ways, but then he gets kind of knocked down in a in a big way also. What do you make of this passage? Yes.
So I was mentioning that earlier on, Jesus has already recognized that, or Peter has already recognized that Jesus is the Messiah. And so now he's allowed evil thoughts to come within him. So when Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan," he's talking about real Satan that has allowed evil thoughts into Peter.
Okay. So in that case, it's ambiguous how exactly to take this. So maybe Jesus is addressing Satan in that case as someone who is putting false thoughts. Yes.
The Jews believe in the Messiah. What was he going to do? He's going to get rid of the Romans. He's going to do all these great things. No, they're going to kill me. What do you mean they're going to kill you?
Yes. Right. So, right. Good. So that's another point about this, is that there are these differing conceptions of what it means to be the Messiah. So Peter has said, you are the Messiah. Good, you get it. But what does that mean? And Jesus begins teaching this vision of the Messiah as a suffering servant, that he'll be rejected, be killed, rise after 3 days. There's a version of the Messiah that Jesus is imagining and Peter has a different view, right? Peter is going to say no, began to rebuke him. My reading of the Hebrew Bible is this, and this isn't, you're wrong. You shouldn't see this. This isn't right. And then Jesus turns around and rebukes him. And then the question is, well, is Satan? Is this a saying? Is he addressing Satan, who's there putting these thoughts in Peter's head? But I think it's important to say there's these differing conceptions of what it will mean to be a Messiah. Is the Messiah a victorious political figure, or is this going to be a Messiah that draws on Isaiah, the suffering servant, a very different set of expectations about the Messiah?
Well, this is one of the Peter was being accused of being a temptation of Jesus, saying, "You don't need to get killed." When the devil was tempting Christ, saying, "I'll give you the world," and Jesus it's another time he said, "Get behind me." He said, and then wasn't it agony in the garden? They were going to cut the ear off the servant and protect him. He says, "No, that's all right. I got to do this." So anyone who keeps him from doing his own death and resurrection is Satan.
Right.
Stopping my plan.
Right, and that's interesting that Mark doesn't give a lot of details about the temptations in the wilderness, but there's overlaps here in the larger accounts of the temptations of offering Jesus the world, and that there could be a physical kingdom offered to Jesus, and here is Jesus acting like this is a kind of temptation from Satan that's kind of that is arisen here on the sudden. I don't think any of us would take it as Peter as being possessed by Satan or something, but there's some way that those are notions of Satan, either suggested or just what Satan would prefer that he needs to reject.
In a way, it's like he's labeling the idea that you would even question God or try to impose your own will against God as a sin in of itself, because I think just with Peter questioning or pushing back, you are going against God, and Jesus is very quick to say, no, that is sin, that is Satan-like.
Right.
You have to recognize that. You have to, kind of that blind faith, that automatic trust is really important.
Yes, I think that's right. I think, that this is, you might think you have this whole plan understood, but you need to listen, and this is going to play out in a way that I know and understand. And those are Satan-like, right? Those are the types of things that would push me away from the true path. Yes?
The fact that he says, "Get behind me," is telling me you need to get out ahead of this. And you need to understand more fully what I'm trying to tell you, and that is what I'm asking for is total commitment,
Yeah.
which means great sacrifice.
Yes, and if I could move from there to the next little passage, I think that's exactly right. Get behind me. And does it mean follow me? Get away from me? Is that a way of saying away from me? But he's not really saying away from me. He's saying get behind me. Maybe, yes, maybe. And so there's discussion about what that means. And I think we'll have to pick up with this next part, but the costs of discipleship that come, which I think go with what you're saying. He summoned the crowd with his disciples. It's interesting. We have this narrow revelation to the disciples. Then he kind of looks around and says, okay, this is a message that's broader. So he gets everybody around. Whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, take up his cross. Interesting that you get people, is that a saying that people have, take up your cross? Or is this a foreshadowing of the cross? And follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake and that of the gospel will save it. Let's pick up with this next week. But it's interesting, like what you're saying, is that now Jesus generalizes it. I have a message. I have a mission that's going to be killed. And now if you're following me, you need to expect that kind of sacrifice as well. So I think that this broader message follows directly on this revelation of who he is. Gary.
There's a comment from an online viewer that says, temptation not to die, Jesus is like us as well as divine, also human. What I'm thinking is, what this gentleman is saying, or person is saying, that don't tempt me, I'm a human too, I have to die. Don't tempt me not to die.
Yes. And we'll see that Garden of Gethsemane, right, is the fact that, for Jesus to be fully human, that has to be a temptation of sorts for him, yes.
I think what a shock this must have been, these people have seen people nailed to crosses and tied to them and dying. And all of a sudden he mentions this cross. That
Yes.
must have been a shock.
Yeah, no mention of that before. Even when he talks about his own death, he's not talking about on a cross at this point. So this, out of nowhere, we get a mention of a cross, and that,
That's extreme.
it's extreme. Yes. And you're going to follow me, and you might be surprised not only at my mission, but at your mission that's coming out of this. Yes.
One interpretation I read was that Satan defined as one who obstructs, and that he's saying, you're holding me back.
Right.
And others have said that.
Yes.
We got to get on board and move ahead.
Right.
Have a plan.
Right. So there's Satan as like capital S, big devil, but then there's you're being a Satan, you're an adversary, you're opposing me, and that is also a way of talking about. So it could be a kind of a looser, get behind me, my opponent. Get behind me, you're becoming my adversary in what you're saying, as opposed to a real spiritual charge of demonic or something like that. And I think that is probably the best way to see this. All right, we got to wrap things up. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to actually come back to this part at the start. Thanks.